All right, apology for the technical challenge. So good evening and a good afternoon and a good morning. Welcome to the Zoom session on the fourth industrial revolution. We're going to spend the next now like 80 minutes to give you a high level view about what the fourth industrial revolution is and why we'd better be aware of it and what it means for you. So participants are from 9 or 10 different locations across 6 time zones. So our core audience has grown from mostly high school students and parents to college graduate students and university professors and young professionals at this moment. The commonality among us is that we're all rooted in Asia and largely China. So our diverse audience, on one hand, it really enriches discussion around this very big, important topic. On the other hand, it's nearly impossible to have an in-depth discussion. So we can have two options to address the issue. One is to organize a series around this topic, and I will invite different speakers. The second option is to organize 2 follow-up discussion sessions, one focus on high school, middle school students and their parents. The other focus on college graduate students, young professionals, and university professors. In both cases, I would invite investors and technologists to join us to bring diversity to the conversation. So at the end of today's session, I will take a poll to gauge your preference regarding to the two options. I wanted to thank Professor Elita Lee. You have heard her voice at the beginning of the conversation. She's a professor from National University of Singapore to help co-host the session today. And my son, Richard Zhen, for helping set up the room session, and he will help take down your questions. Should we not be able to address all the questions today, we can bring them to the follow-up sessions. So don't worry if your question is not being answered or addressed. A little bit about the background about why we are here, and maybe a little background about myself. I have been an executive for the past 10 years in a large conventional Fortune 100 energy company. In the past 3 years, I had the opportunity to think about and experiment how to transform our traditional business in a wake of exponential growth and advancement in the digital technology and the economy. By doing so, I had the opportunity to hold conversations with many people from large digital companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, and many of their smaller peers, and consulting firms like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, Deloitte, IH Market, and others. Startup communities in the US, Europe, and China, thought leaders at MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Tsinghua, and singular universities, venture capital firms like SoftBank, UBS, and others, and of course our industry peers in the energy industry. So in short, a lot of people. So I wanted to share back that knowledge with you. We're at the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution. There is no lack of information out there for you to actually get acquainted with the topic. And some of you are actually indeed at the frontier of the revolution today by pushing the technology envelope, for example, in the areas of machine learning and a smart city. What I want to do is to actually use the insights that I gained through my practices and conversations to help frame and connect all the information out there. And through this connected, of lenses, to examine together with you the key driving factors behind the revolution, and very importantly, the opportunities and the challenges it brings to the human society. We do want to land on what it means to you, each one of you. As a minimum, I hope you walk out to the session feel better informed and equipped to consume the vast amount of information out there critically and sort out what is truth and what is noise. If you are in school or at the early stages of your career, hope this can also help you to start to think how you can prepare yourself for embracing the revolution, which is coming at us inevitably, both professionally and personally, and perhaps doing your part to ensure the outcome of the revolution is a just and a sustainable world where humans can live a productive and equal life together. Okay, so I got a warning for a 40 minutes limit. So just a warning to everybody, if we got disconnected, please just simply log back in. My apology for not sort out the technology ahead of time. So to get everybody on the same page as a way for a level setting, let's watch a short video explaining what the fourth industrial revolution is. Let me share the screen and see if you be able to watch it. So stop sharing and share. And I think it's this one. And we'll go this one. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
We've moved so far away from the Constitution that in many ways we don't even recognize it. We think that we're becoming more advanced by abandoning the Constitution.
3D printed bone, or use a 3D printed
So we'll go back.
Industrial revolution, and it's been a hot topic among academics, politicians, and business leaders ever since. But what exactly does it mean? The term Fourth Industrial Revolution was coined by the founder of the World Economic Forum, a former professor named Klaus Schwab. Schwab wrote a book with that title to describe an era marked by a technological revolution that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. Let's break that down. Technologies like artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, or the Internet of Things are becoming ingrained in our day-to-day lives and even our bodies. Think of voice-activated virtual assistants, face ID recognition, or healthcare sensors. Schwab first presented his vision of the Fourth Industrial Revolution at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting here in Davos in 2016. But to understand the idea, we need to go much further back in history, to Industrial Revolution number 1. The first Industrial Revolution started in Great Britain around 1760 and spread to Europe and North America through the early 1800s. It was powered by a major invention, the steam engine. The result, new manufacturing processes, the creation of factories, and a booming textiles industry. From the late 1800s, the second industrial revolution was marked by mass production and new industries like steel, oil, and electricity. The light bulb, telephone, and internal combustion engine were a few of the major inventions of this era. The third industrial revolution, sometimes known as the digital revolution, occurred in the second half of the 20th century. In just a few decades, we saw the invention of the semiconductor, personal computer, and the internet. So what separates the fourth industrial revolution from the third? Experts say the main difference is that technology is merging more and more with humans' lives, and that technological change is happening faster than ever. Consider this. It took 75 years for 100 million users to adopt the telephone. Instagram signed up 100 million users in just 2 years, while Pokemon Go caught that amount in 1 month. 3D printing is just one example of fast-paced technology in the fourth industrial revolution. The industry has gone from a business idea to big business, with 3D printer shipments expected to increase from just under 200,000 in 2015 to 2.4 million in 2020. Today, you can have a hip replacement from a 3D printed bone or use a 3D printed bionic arm. Talk about blurring the line between humans and technology, right? This new era of technology is driving a lot of innovation. You can see in this chart the number of patents related to the fourth industrial revolution for things like 3D printing or AI has been climbing up and up since early 2000. Organizations are embracing new technologies to make their businesses more efficient, similar to how they embraced the steam engine during the first industrial revolution. But some companies and governments are struggling to keep up with the fast pace of technological change. Research shows innovators, investors, and shareholders benefit the most from innovation. The risk is that the fourth industrial revolution is making inequality, which is already a big issue, even worse. One study found billionaires have driven almost 80% of the 40 main breakthrough innovations over the last 40 years. That's a problem when the richest 1% of households already own nearly half of the world's wealth. Experts warn we are in a winner-takes-all economy, where high-skilled workers are rewarded with high pay and the rest of workers are left out. Studies confirm technologies like AI will eliminate some jobs and create demand for new skills that many workers don't have. Privacy concerns are another issue as the fourth industrial revolution turns every company into a tech company. Industries from food to retail to banking are going digital, and they're collecting a lot more data about their customers along the way. Users are starting to worry that companies know too much about their private digital lives. The World Economic Forum says a majority of leaders don't have confidence their organizations are ready for the changes associated with the fourth industrial revolution. With tech changing fast every day, it's time to catch up.
So a few key takeaway from the video. Number one, maybe we just review what are the big factors and big characteristics of the Industrial Revolution. Anybody volunteer to summarize that? Okay, I guess, like we got too many participants. Maybe I'll summarize that. The big takeaway for Industrial Revolution is that it's gonna fundamentally change the way we live and the way we work and the way we actually communicate with each other. Both social structure and the economic structure is gonna change, and it's gonna change globally. So that's number one. That it's the same from the first all the way to the third industrial revolution, and we're at the beginning of the fourth one. The characteristic of the fourth industrial revolution, first, like any other industrial revolution, it's always a start with a technological innovation, and the kind of innovation it can drive a very broad, like a socio-economical footprint. So for the fourth industrial revolution, it starts with the the kind of technologies in internet, big data, the sensor technology that was, Internet of Things that was mentioned in the video. The machine learning and the AI, robotics were mentioned in the video. 3D printing, bioengineering, genetic energy, technology, some nanomaterial science. Those were, all in a play. And these technologies start to merge, as the video said, the physical world, our body, the things that we deal with, together with the digital, which means the data, the internet, like the car, the autonomous car, And the biological world, you see some of the anesthetic arms. And later we're gonna watch a video to show the chip implanted in the brain that's gonna be connected with external computer. So that's another characteristics. And you also perhaps heard about the characteristics about the industrial revolution is the speed of the change is very fast, and it's taking up at this point. You saw the exponential change. Um, so given that, I wanted to share a few more videos so that it gave you a better sense of, what different technology are at play, and also where are we today in terms of the technology development. So I'll share another, screen. This is a more, this one I think everybody actually uses. This is the Amazon, how Amazon fulfillment center works. It's like after you do your click online shopping, what happens behind the scenes, and it's pretty high tech.
This is Business Interrupted, insights on the new now. Daily takeaways on what's next for the C-suite and the entire working world.
3D printed bone, or use a 3D print.
Sorry. I thought this is the Amazon fulfillment center. Okay. All right, so let me check. Yeah, so it's the first one.
A toast to the Empress of Russia.
If the Emperor dies, Russia goes to the...
So this is an Amazon fulfillment center. You see all the robotics moving around. And Houston actually has a fulfillment center. Next time we can organize a visit to the center after the pandemic passes us. Okay, we got a network bandwidth issue. So you see the shelf above the robotics. These are all the goods that people actually place the order. And now you can see the humans. They are working side by side with the robotics. So the robotics are more like they are colleagues, to help the human to find a large quantity of goods and move them around. And the humans are more, working on the sorting and the final quality control, make sure that the right items are placed in a box that a customer actually ordered. As you can see, this is a typical fulfillment center like this one will have over 1 million items And you see very few people are working here, and the large army here are actually the robotics. And the engineers in Amazon headquarters located in Seattle, they actually are behind the scenes using supercomputer to put together optimization routines to make sure once you actually click the place order button, behind the scenes, the optimization program will calculate, uh, relative to where you are. If I'm in Houston, they're gonna decide, should they send the item to the Houston fulfillment center, or should they send the order into a Dallas, for example, center. They will calculate the traffic in Houston, local traffic in Houston, and decide if the fulfillment center, which is actually in the north part of Houston, in the Woodland area, if it comes to the city where I live, they felt like it perhaps the local traffic will take a longer time than airplane from Dallas landed in Hobby Airport, and from Hobby Airport to get to my house. So there's a very complicated optimization program behind the scenes that does all that calculation to sort it out, which part of the fulfillment center handles a particular customer. And you can think about, for Amazon, they have anytime they have several hundred million customers, and that's how heavy the optimization program actually handles behind the scenes. So that's on the Amazon fulfillment center, where you see as today we start to see that the robotics and the human are actually working side by side together, and the robotic they still can only handle relatively single tasks, not multiple tasks. But as you can imagine, as the robotic technology, become more and more advanced, the robotics they can handle more and more tasks. So that's on the robotic side. What I want to share, a very amazing, a aspect of the technology development is a IBM debater. So this is an IBM artificial intelligence machine, and I actually was in this particular event myself in San Francisco, last year. What IBM scientists did is they put together an AI machine, which you actually see here in this black box with the blue window here. It's an AI machine, and this AI machine, what you're gonna see is it live debates with a world champion on a debate. So this is the Lincoln Douglas set up on the debate stage, and each party, so the person as well as the machine, were given 15 minutes to prepare for the topic, and there's no form, other than that, there's no prior training on the machine side. And I kind of want to, only show, this is a very long video, and you are welcome to actually watch it on your own. But what I wanted to show it to you is the final stages of the debate. As you all perhaps, understand is, that Lincoln Douglas has a, the opening statement, and there's a couple of rounds of a rebut, and then this come to the final conclusion stage after the long debate. So I want to show you that conclusion stage, as well as a bit of a discussion between IBM scientists and the debate host, so that it gave you a sense of what the artificial intelligence can do today. So this is by far the most cutting edge artificial intelligence capability that we have as a human race today. Just want to give you
time to move on to round three. And round three are closing statements by each debater in turn, and they will begin once again closing in support of the resolution we should subsidize preschool. Here again is Project Debater.
Thanks for this final opportunity to speak out in this debate, and thanks, Harish Natarajan. One might say that this conversation can serve no purpose anymore, but I feel differently. Allow me to start with a brief rebuttal. Among other things, I think Mr. Natarajan suggested that preschools should not be subsidized because this will reduce their quality. I would like to offer a different view. I disagree with my opponent. Subsidizing preschools will have no negative effect on their quality. If anything, the opposite is true. One of many reasons is that subsidizing attracts more skilled and qualified people to the field, improving the quality of preschools for all. Here is a final summary of my arguments today. My opponent claimed that preschools are harmful. I believe my argument suggested that the benefits outweigh potential disadvantages. I touched on three issues: children, students, and crime. Specifically, I noted that preschool education improves children's development. In addition, I suggested that attending preschool helps students succeed. And a final point to consider is that preschool can prevent future crime. When this debate just started, I said that we will talk about financial issues. We did, and I am convinced that in my speeches, I supplied enough data to justify support for preschools. At the end of the day, the benefits welfare provides outweigh the disadvantages. Welfare helps the most important segments in society: the underprivileged, the weak, the children. If we want to have a better society, then we must invest in those who are less fortunate. Finally, in the words of British politician and writer Benjamin Disraeli, power has only one duty: to secure the social welfare of the people. We should subsidize preschools. Thanks for your attention.
And the last word going to Harish, arguing in his closing statement against the resolution.
So for saving the time, maybe I'll.
So I think we disagree on far less than it may seem, because we agree that the people we should care
I'll
about
skip
are the underprivileged,
the human debater
children,
and moving into
individuals
the
like
discussion.
as quality across the board may not fall.
Why don't you come up to the stage? You've already met.
So these are the scientists behind the AI machine.
You have already met Noam Slonin, and Noam is the principal investigator of Project Debater, and also Ranit Akhronov, the worldwide manager. So the first person I want to go to actually on this is Harish, this experience of fighting with this thing. Rhetorically.
Well, what really struck me is the potential value for Project Debater when synthesized with a human being, and that the amount of knowledge which it's able to grasp. And more than that, obviously you can get some knowledge just by searching for it, but able to contextualize it and place it as, this information tells us this, which I found to be really useful. So all the studies from the OECD, from those countries, of those quotations, were all just really interesting to me because it was nicely phrased and it was contextualized as to what the purpose of it is. And I think if you take some of those skills and you add to that a human being which can use it in slightly more subtle ways, I think that can be incredibly powerful. I think that's what I got from it, which is it was fascinating to listen to because I can see a lot of the potential it has just in terms of the knowledge and the ability to contextualize that knowledge better than most human beings
You
can.
are a very good sport. It was apparent, I think, throughout that that the two debaters had different skills and different talents and different advantages. On the advantage side, what does debater have going for her that Harish could not possibly match?
So they have very different styles, I believe, and a different set of skills. But I would like to start by, again, telling Harish she's really a superb debater.
Yeah.
It was really amazing to hear you speak today. And And what is interesting to see is that I think in terms of rhetorical skills, the system is still not at the level of a debater like Harish. That said, the system is capable of pinpointing relevant evidence within a massive collection of so about 10 billion sentences that are in the memory of the system. And the system needs to very quickly pinpoint these little pieces of text that are relevant to the topic, argumentative in nature, and hopefully support our side of the debate, and then somehow glue them together into a meaningful narrative, which is very, very difficult for a machine to do.
And Renee, you and I were talking earlier, and you were arguing, interesting word, you were making the point that while this is an interesting exercise, win or lose in the audience, you see the good that this thing offers, not being to win a game, but to help us figure things out. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that the vision behind Project Debater is how do we develop a technology? And I think Harish talked to that, the potential of AI and humans doing something together that brings the skills of both of them into something that's more than one of them. I think it's not a question of, is AI going to be better at debating than humans? That's not really an interesting goal. The goal of this demonstration, the goal of developing this technology was to set something that's challenging and far away, and by that enable us to develop technologies of how do you find all that information within a massive text, how do you organize that, how do you bring it to a position that it's digestible by humans in order to drive better decision making more quickly for humans. So really I think what's going to be a win here is that people come out of this room and say, wow, I can see that this interaction is enriching me and enriching the way I can make decisions in the future.
I mentioned before that in Intelligence Squared, we've set things up so that by its nature, a debate presents an audience with at least 2 points of view on something. And while the audience votes and we declare a winner, the reality is that there are two teams debating because there actually are two valid, coherent arguments from each side. And it's not a zero-sum thing. It's more that they complement and they add to one another. Does that thought relate also to your vision for a debater?
Yeah, I think if you think about grand challenges in the past in AI, these were often cases where there is either a factual question, there's a right or wrong, there's a clear winner. When you think of debate, this is something where the winner is not clear, and the whole question does have 2 points. There isn't one right answer. And technology like Project Debater, it could debate both sides, so it can very quickly help you understand both sides of a problem, bring you all the pros and cons, so you have a wider view of the topic.
So I'll stop the Project Debater video here. I think a few takeaways from the Project Debater. Number one is, have you noticed all the people on the stage? We got 4 people on the stage, 1 American, 1 British, Indian British, and two, one from Europe and 1 from South America. So you're gonna see in the technology world, the workforce is extremely international, and that's what you actually gonna see. The second takeaway is about the AI, where AI is and where AI is heading. The debater, the human debater and the scientist summarized very well, is that the machine, the AI and the human being actually have complementary skills. AI is really good at going through large amount of information and contextualize it. And the human is actually much better at the reasoning and differentiating very subtle points. So I think what you're gonna see is that the future would be the integration of a human intelligence and the artificial intelligence, and that will make the future like a workforce a lot more powerful. So if you're into technology or if you're into science, you would start to ask yourself the question, what can a machine do to actually help you to gain the like the kind of skills that you may not have, but the machine can help you. So that's what that like a future gonna look like. And the behind the scenes technology here mostly is around the natural language processing. And now we're gonna watch we're gonna watch a video about about merging the biological world and the physical world through
Well, the executive's latest
brain
startup
chip.
is called Neuralink, which focuses on the goal of implanting chips into human brains and also connecting brains to computers. Here's what Elon Musk said at a conference in California about the technology last night.
This, I think, has a very good purpose, which is to cure important diseases and ultimately to help secure humanity's future as a civilization relative to AI. This, I think, has tremendous potential, and we hope to have this aspirationally in a human patient before the end of next year. So this is not far.
Not far, he says. The implantation of the neuron, the implantation of the neuron-sized threads requires the use of a special robot, but Musk said it's a minimally invasive surgery. So Thornton, I'm sure that means you'll be getting one soon.
Gonna get a few for the kids with my 23andMe kit.
Naturally,
surprise.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the disease thing sounds great. That seems very awesome for humanity. But I am definitely thinking that for me, if I'm Elon, chips and brains drive the car, car's automated, your Tesla is going to appreciate. Problem solved. All you have to do is get people to put chips in their brains, and Teslas will appreciate and value like you promised.
I mean, there's a lot of use cases.
I love that analysis.
There's a lot of use cases.
This is how you got to think.
I mean,
I think Elon. That's how you got to.
Yeah. I mean, I wish he would get those self-driving cars going. I mean, that would be an achievement in itself. But yes, if he's dealing with people who have neurological diseases, spinal cord injuries, and they can be connected through this device, and it can help them, then great. But if Elon Musk is coming for my brain, forget it. I definitely am not interested.
I mean, there are a lot of people working on that too, right? Specifically when we're talking about trying to figure out how the brain can send messages to a computer or to a machine in terms of people like you mentioned, Sabine, who have mobility problems.
But you think
figure out how to work things that way. There's a lot of companies working on it. Part of the reason why he actually held this event was to get the name out there and also help hire people. Because right now he's only got I don't even know if it's 100 people working there, but it's smaller, much smaller than any of the other.
So we'll stop here about these videos, but I hope we had a glimpse through this video into the future, and you saw that robotics and a human, they work in harmony together, each draw respective strengths, and the machine can carry out reasoning, particularly digest a large amount of information and contextualize these information. So it become an intelligent, knowledgeable assistant to augment human intelligence. And you saw the last one, the human brain or other organs or body parts can be connected with man-made machines or devices to extend the human capability or capacity or cure some of the disease. So in that way, merging, you start to see the merging of the physical, digital, and the biological world. And these are at the very beginning of that journey. So if we go back to our presentation, so we talked about the first, to zoom out, think about the 4 videos. We can take the first industrial revolution as an example. The invention and the broad application of the steam engine brought emergence of capitalism, the social division of labor, transition from agriculture to industrial production, and uneven distribution of wealth, and started the imperialism as well. So there's good and bad as a result, but it fundamentally changed human society. The same would, same applied to the second and the third industrial revolution. Innovation and technology advancement exponentially liberate global productivity and therefore powered very significant growth of a global economy. At the same time, all that advancement did not prevent or actually on the contrary, to some degree triggered two world wars, did not prevent the significant conflict in the world. And not everyone in the end was equally better off as a result of the revolution. So the question is, how can we learn from history and do better this time? And it is perhaps the biggest privilege as well as the responsibility bestowed upon this young generation, like your generation. So one thing I learned at MIT is that the purpose to advance science and technology is to actually improve people's lives. So if we're into the future science and technology, we really need to keep that in mind, to keep people's life, to better their life as an ultimate goal. So coming back to revolution really means a very significant global change, particularly around the socio-economical and the mindset changes. And that proved very difficult throughout history, that level and extent of the change, and not to mention the pace of the change for the fourth industrial revolution is actually a lot faster than the other three. And also on top of that, at this juncture, we're living in a very complex world. There's the underlying cultural and religious differences across the world that we need to negotiate. And in the midst of the change, some results from the technological innovation, these are the changes we welcome, thinking about our ability to have the Zoom session today across 3 continents. And some are, responses, some kind of changes today, what we see are actually responses to the uncertainties associated with the revolution. I would have put make the American, great again, that policy as a response to that unforeseen uncertainty associated with the change. So the old and the new thoughts, they are in conflict and tension today. At the core, the question is, the current social, economical, and geopolitical framework, it was a result of the previous revolution and the previous, like a framework. Is that capable of helping us to harness this accelerating technological trend for the progress of a human society? So that would be the key question for us to actually examine. So I wanted to bring you to, this slide so that we can examine together the key factors that likely impacted the pace, the focus, and the outcome of the fourth industrial revolution. Naturally, these are the area where the new and old thoughts have the most tensions. one thing to point it out, as we think through the key factors, is that the current framework of thought, as I said, is based on the history. And that history actually has a very fundamental characteristics, is that that history has a scarcity model, which means, everything is a competition because we did not have enough land to grow food. We did not have enough food, and later we did not have enough energy, access to oil, and later, at this juncture, maybe not everybody have access to like more luxury goods for everybody on Earth to live a very comfortable life. So the question is, would the fourth industrial revolution be able to actually turn scarcity into abundance? Like, can we think totally revolutionize our agriculture and grow food in a much more confined space? Can we actually, produce energy more abundantly so everybody have access to energy? Otherwise, we would have to face a bigger, question today, is that, as the humans start to face bigger threat, like, like the global warming, the pandemics, and, also limited resources, how can we actually peacefully address them together? So why not we go through, that, keep that as the preamble and think through the key elements that are today in big tension. So number one is actually about the goal of capital investment. So just for setting up the playing field, we need the money and the investment to extract, like a new material or raw material from the earth, like those are rare earths for chips. And, after you make the chips, build the computers, we need the money to build them and to power the big computer. And, you see the big computers are behind the IBM AI machine, behind the Amazon fulfillment center, and also need the money to actually hire highly talented people to bring technology to reality. So we need a capital. And up to today, capitalism and a free market have been the key enabler for previous industrial revolutions. And to a larger degree, the current progress with the fourth industrial revolution. It is about free competition and mostly measured in terms of a profit and a return to capital. And right now, what we see is we ask the question: is that the best for us to move forward as a human race? So we start to see some activist investors, or like a thematic investors. They care about addressing global warming or some social equality. So they actually invest in order for companies to actually pay attention to those dimensions. So even the business circles today, when the circles start to talk about the future leaders, we start to talk about, future leaders need to actually balance the people, the planet, and the profit. Not as singular as before, that we're gonna maximize the profit. So this is a very important dimension. We don't have time to actually go into the detail of that, but to summarize is that for the goal of a capital investment, if we continue the way it is and leave it unchanged or unaddressed, there are gonna be a growing uncertainty and a volatility for the next generation in a capital market. And capital typically drives innovation and drive a lot of the economic activities. So it'll drive uncertainty largely and the volatile economic activities into the future. So that need to be addressed. And also it is a source of the inequality, the growing gap between the poor and the rich, as you saw a glimpse in the fourth industrial revolution short video as well. So the second aspect is about foreign policy. For the foreign policy today, we live in a world, like an order. It's largely defined during the Cold War era. It is actually again based on a competition model. It's a competition between countries. So there are the groups, that they, like the World Economic Forum, that group is trying to really aim for progress, the different countries together and address the common issues together. So that's kind of one group, and calling for lateralism and cooperation, among countries. But still with limited resources, that'll put the rich countries have to share or allow the poor countries to catch up. So that, with a scarcity model, with the limited resource, that actually is very difficult for the developed country to actually swallow, particularly for the countries that they actually have internal issues. Like for example, in the U.S., we have seen a growing gap between the rich and poor, and through the pandemic, you see a lot of people, they are actually having a food issue, so they cannot feed themselves or the family. So with that issue presenting in individual countries, even in a developed country, it is very difficult for them to sit back and think about, how to holistically rebalance the limited resource so that for the human society to actually move forward together. So this issue is very important as well. Ideally is we address the scarcity issue at the root. And if we cannot address that. And, addressing the scarcity issue does require cooperation across countries and nations. But then before we solve it, it's gonna be a challenge for the countries to sit down to cooperate with each other. So that'll be a pretty big challenge for the generation to actually, use your wisdom to actually address. The third issue is a worldwide issue. Is actually there's a growing gap between the rich and the poor in every country. So the world has shifted from largely labor-centric, like a labor-intensive, labor-centric economy at this point to a knowledge-centric economy. So the biggest gap between rich and poor today, yes, we mentioned about the food and clothes and all that, but food and the clothes between the rich and poor are much less comparing to the opportunity for the rich and the poor kids to actually receive education, especially in the era of a knowledge-centric economy. So moving forward, as you actually get a glimpse in the fourth industrial revolution video, that the highly skilled worker, they're gonna become increasingly better off, and the ones who are less educated, they're gonna become increasingly worse off. So this issue left unaddressed, the gap will continue to grow between the rich and poor. And with with that, especially in a knowledge-centric economy, we're gonna start to see a significant portion of the population who are not able to, very effectively, participate in the economic activity. So that's gonna be another issue that this generation gonna face. So when we go through, the fourth industrial revolution, we particularly need two kinds of people if we really think about the future. In addition to a lot of the key kinds of skills we need, and there's gonna be the universal, like a skills that we need as we move into the future, and there's gonna be two specific ones that are associated with the fourth industrial revolution. So the one kind is the kind of leaders who have vision, the vision that's merging the physical, biological, and the digital world together. And we need, the leaders who have that vision, who can merge those three together, and most importantly, to bring together diverse people under that common vision and bring that vision to reality. So that's one kinds of people that are very important to think about to become, for the fourth industrial revolution. The second kind is the kind of engineers and the scientists who can ingrain those digital and the biological world into the physical world. It's like get it done. So this calls for significant amount of STEM talent, the science, technology, engineering, and math talents. That doesn't mean that you have to do STEM to be that talent. It's more about you need to think that way, whatever the other things you do. So if you're an artist, you want to think about, what kind of artificial intelligence, what kind of a computing, augmented tools that can help you to actually design arts a lot better. So thinking about that way. Right. So as we start to see later in the conversation that STEM talents is actually not distributed evenly across the world. You gotta see the China, India, and the U.S. are the three countries that has the most talent for the decade to come. And when we think about what we talked about, the geopolitical, the foreign policy issue, the growing gap between rich and poor, and now we have the uneven distribution of the STEM talent, that actually gonna exacerbate the issue. You gotta see if we are still in a competition as opposed to a cooperation mindset. Whoever has more STEM talents, who can turn the vision of the fourth industrial revolution into reality, who actually gonna be more powerful. And if we go through the competition mode, these STEM talents will be part of that competition, and it'll generate an even greater gap between the poor and the rich countries, and the poor and the rich people as well. So that's something to think about. This is to really get into the details about what I said about the ability for the three countries, the US, China, and India, to actually deliver the promise of the fourth industrial revolution. And you saw this chart on the right. That's actually by 2030, the amount of STEM graduates or the talents as a proxy to measure the talents from China, from India, and from the United States. You're gonna see that China by far has the most, a talent. The population base is pretty big. and India follows, and the US gonna have a relatively smaller number in the STEM field. But then if we go into the detail, there's some nuances. Number one, coming back to the money deal, the capital investment, right? Because all the resources actually gonna follow the capital investment, including human talents. So at this point, U.S. has a very mature and dominate capital market, and the U.S. Capital market actually is a global oriented. So even though these firms may actually headquartered or in the U.S., but they actually are facing global investment. Like for the key technologies that we talked about tonight. And then for China, there's a very active and a robust emerging and a maturing capital market as well. And that's actually focused on China. So you see there's a US-led global venture market, and there's a China-led China capital market. India at the moment is actually trying to catch up. You saw the investment both from China and the US actually in India. From a talent perspective, even though the US actually have less, STEM talents moving into the future, but it actually dominates in terms of high-end talents. So they have the ability to, design, to actually push the envelope and, to be at the far front of the innovation. Because of the US policy, it actually helps stimulate and empower innovation. And China actually, with the sheer amount of, engineers, a lot of them actually are at the work B level, like a more on the optimization and, help bring the design and the vision into reality. And India actually is in between. So as you see that there's a lot to be gained for China and the US to actually collaborate as opposed to actually compete, because each actually brings different strengths to the table. And, the fourth industrial, so as I mentioned, the current economical, social, and even the business model, the economic world are a result of previous, revolution and the previous world. Moving into the future, there's gonna be significant changes in that economical structure. And those kind of structural changes actually require a lot of the cooperation across industry sectors and different value chains. And, so the free market competition and antitrust legal framework in the US may actually, from a mindset perspective in the US business circle, as well as from the legal perspective, it may take some time to sort out for the US to become, the US industry to become a lot more collaborative moving into the future. And in China, because largely it has a large amount of a state-owned enterprise. So for that, state-owned enterprise to actually collaborate and cooperate under a very deliberate country level, like a planning, and a budgeting cycle, that actually to some degree actually gonna help on the cooperation side. It does have a drawbacks and other issues, but in terms of facilitating the cooperation, what I see, from on the ground to talk to Alibaba, Tencent, and Huawei, I actually see the collaboration much closer in China ecosystem than what I see in the US and in Europe. Europe is actually a lot better than the US. On the cooperation side, US at this point have a lot to catch up. from a regulatory environment perspective, you saw a big concern in the AI and the machine learning in the digital world is actually the privacy law, which is very important. So the way we see the U.S. and Europe is going through right now is a very broad study and a debate. So U.S. and Europe is taking through a path of we go slow in the beginning, so that we actually put together, to mitigate the unintended consequences and the risks in order to actually go faster down the road. And also, Europe and the U.S. is worried about the potential missteps by other countries, particularly around China, because China is taking on a path of, I'm going to learn through experimentation and move forward with agile adjustment to policies. And when you do that, when you have a very large population, the worry from the Western country is that, what about the missteps, about the privacy, protection, and some of the ethics around the bioengineering and the ethics around the AI front. So that's another point of attention between the US and the China as well. So moving forward to, to put it all together, and thinking it back to, what are the implications to United States and the Americans. A lot of the audience here are U.S. born Americans, so this would be really relevant to you. So the most important thing for U.S. is U.S. need to rethink its role in the fourth industrial revolution. At this point, it may actually feel there are a lot of threats to the U.S., but I think U.S. need to really balance out about the common threat facing human being, and what are some of the perceived competition-based threats, with regarding to countries like China in particular. So the current foreign policy right now, it doesn't have a really strategic, balance between, the long-term needs and, addressing some of the near-term threats. And also the framework is more about competition than cooperation. So that'll take time for the US to actually think it through. And I personally feel it may take a generation, it perhaps need the older generation to actually really pass through the history, and for the newer generation to come in to rethink about the role that U.S. plays. We already touched base on the regulatory framework and touched base on the foreign policy. There's a comment about the lawmakers, the current lawmakers. Again, it's we have a relatively older generation of the lawmakers, and they do not have sufficient in-depth grasp of the technology and its implications. So they may not be equipped enough information to actually change the regulatory framework to actually help cultivate the benefit of the fourth industrial revolution. And in the US, we face the growing gap between the rich and poor. And you see on TV, we also have the racial disparity to actually address. And these issues, if left unaddressed, it's actually gonna, become more and more extreme as we become more and more technologically advanced. And, it may actually, like a impact on the stability of a very foundation of the country. And what can you do? Like you guys are in high school and some are in college and graduate school. At this point, we talked about, what's the non-regret? You wanted to, get at least literate about, like the fourth industrial revolution, about the kind of technologies that are coming at us. Doesn't matter if you are a humanity or arts major, or if you are a STEM major. I think that's something as a non-regret for you to think about. And the other part is that there are the soft, skills that become ever more important than before. The kind of skills for you to, build a relationship, a meaningful relationship, like to get together with people, to understand their struggle, and to motivate and incentivize people. And the second skill is a system level skill, a system level thinking. So as you see that the world become a lot more complex, but you need to actually see the bigger picture in order to sort out what's truth, what's noise. And that is very important. So become tech savvy, have a, like a build your people skills, and then build your skill to think at a high level, the system level, so that you can sort out the tremendous noise that, your generation actually is facing. And, in particular, there are some specific, like challenges to China and Chinese Americans as well. So China, as I mentioned, it actually right now has the capital and the governance system due to the large amount of enterprise are owned by the government. They can much better and freely cooperate, which is a very desirable feature for delivering the fourth industrial generation, and also the amount of talent to actually move forward with the fourth industrial revolution. But China at this point really need of wisdom in foreign policy. I think it equally share the responsibility, as we already talked about the U.S. side, for the China side to actually think about, like its role to help the world to safely and happily accept, like China is a, like it's a, like a rising, and it has the potential to contribute to the world in the revolution. So a hawkish foreign policy is not gonna help. Like so that's on the China side, and like at this point, I think it's a lot easier just to take a hawkish approach in the foreign policy. It's a lot more challenging to actually do the hard work to actually convince U.S. and the U.S.'s ally to put aside the differences and focus on the bigger issues that face like a larger part of the population across the world, and help both countries and the rest of the world to achieve like a sustained prosperity. I think at this point, none of the countries, U.S. or China, have achieved that. And also, like to make sure that we can move forward in a more collaborative environment. And this would be a particular special mission, almost like a, like a lay upon the Chinese Americans as a group, because like it or not, the fate of the group is actually connected to the relationship between the two countries. So it's very important whenever we can, big or small, to actually help bridge the two countries to collaborate, so that it actually can, so that we are aiming for a more just and a better world, moving into the future. So I'll stop here, and I wanted to open up for questions and comments, and I had asked Richard to actually record some of your questions. If you don't feel comfortable to actually ask, you can post it on the chat box.
Hey, Xiaojun, this is Arthur.
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
So those of you who don't know me, I actually was kind of admitted Xiaojun and left her hanging. Anyway, at MIT. But one thing I want to really say to this younger, especially this younger generation of Chinese Americans, do yourself a favor, study history, Chinese history, Western history, especially over the last 200 years, and try to understand what happened during that time, the last 200 years. And you will find not justification so much, but some reason behind a more hawkish Chinese policy, because I don't know how many of you have actually, the younger ones who grew up in the US, right, are aware of the Boxer Rebellion, the 8 countries coming up, dividing Shanghai and Beijing, and Japan occupying China, occupying Hong Kong, the Opium War, getting Hong Kong basically forcefully grabbed by the British. So there's a long history in there. I think that's what China, by and large, is thinking. We are not going to let that happen again, right? Especially looking at what the US is trying to do in Hong Kong in the last few months. So, and very frankly, I've traveled the world the last 20, 30 years. You'll be amazed how many of the foreign countries were ex-colonies of the US and especially the United Kingdom. So they're not necessarily in a competitive mode. They're actually in a domination imperial. I'm sounding a communist now, but they are actually like imperialistic mode.
Maybe
right?
Just a footnote is that Arthur Chan actually came from Hong Kong,
right,
and spent like over 30 years in the US, and
50
years in the US, and
I did not get to study the history, the British history, the English history when I was there. But when I travel the world and actually see the historic context and how colonialism is really into Western, and what we're seeing a lot of it is continuation of the Western colonialism. So as a Chinese, I think we be aware of these things and help change that, right? And I think this is something when you get older, you see it, you see the history, and this is something that always worries me the last few years, and you just sit back, ask yourself, since World War II, how many countries have invaded and fight wars of other countries, right? Except for the Russians invading Afghanistan. The rest of the wars are being conducted by the US. And you sit back and say, why is assuming you're American, you sit back and why is my country doing that? So those are things I think you should think about in terms of geopolitics. That's my 2 cents worth. Sorry about intruding on Xiaojun's.
No, I think Arthur, this is I think this is a great forum in a sense that we got people across different continents and a very diverse background, to actually talk about this topic. And I know we are not able to go in depth, but I think it's good to actually bring out, different thoughts so that we can all talk about that. And hopefully the idea is, through the different perspectives, we can help you to frame your view, not necessarily to actually, put your view into our view, but we help you to frame how to think about, the complex world, and help you to prepare, you going into, your college and your workplace, and and your fulfillment of your personal potential as well. So thank you, Arthur, for actually chiming in. That was a very important perspective, because I think a lot of the parents are actually very similar like me. The parents actually grew up in China, the mainland China, and came to the U.S. and most of the kids are American born. So then your perspective, you actually was born in mainland China during the Japanese occupation, then moved to Hong Kong, and came to
But that's
the
my
US
parents,
for,
not me. I'm not that old.
okay, so you were born in Hong Kong, came to the
Yeah,
US for
yeah,
undergraduate,
yeah.
and being at MIT as a faculty there for very long time, and then now Arthur is with a professor Elita Lee in Singapore, the National University of Singapore, setting up the geophysics program there.
The one thing I want to point out, right? I'm like the rest of you guys, most of it. I'm a scientist first, scientist engineer first. So for the longest time, I ignored the history side of the world. As I go older and travel, then I'm beginning to get a much better sense of how the world is by studying history. So it sounds, I wish I studied history earlier. Let's put it this way.
Arthur, this is Elita here. Can I make a suggestion? Can I open the floor first for the young, kids, maybe the high school kids who have questions first, and then maybe we move to, college students, graduate students, and Xiaojun and Arthur will, and whoever in this forum would answer questions from your perspectives. How about that?
Thank you, Elita, for facilitating. That's great.
All right.
Hi, can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Sure.
All right. Well, to first introduce myself, I'm Etienne, and I'm a high schooler at Seven Lakes High School. I really love this discussion about the need to shift towards a collaborative point of view. I just wanted to know, since in the past, national pride and identity has been a huge motivation for progress. For example, when Germany was unified, they used nationalism as a means to promote their progress. But I wanted to know whether nationalism was at risk and what are the possible implications for regarding the motivation for progress.
Okay, so I'll take it first, and Alita, Arthur, and the other parents, please chime in. And Etienne, first of all, thank you very much. This is a very, very good question. Very, very good. So here's my perspective. I feel like the national pride, I personally feel it perhaps should mostly root in the cultural, in the heritage, aspect. Like in the US, it has a tremendous emphasis on self-made and resilient and self-reliance, and tremendous amount of innovation, and so those are, I feel like if you would think, these are American spirit. And China, as a, like your parents perhaps all, already gave you. So I won't really go there, but I use the US as an example. So I feel like every country has very unique cultural, like an aspect that's heritage to their history and their culture. And, that is something everybody should actually be proud of and, carry on. The kind of a proud about, I live a better life and you live a lower life. And, I have more resources than you. I felt like that is actually even against the US Constitution. So I think that's how I see it, like moving forward, how to reconcile, like the national pride versus, a more cooperation approach. Anyone to add to that? It's a great question.
It is a great question, and having holding a U.S. passport and been in U.S. for 50 years, although I was born in Hong Kong and grew up in Hong Kong, that's a great question. What is American is a very great question. However, what is being taught and what is being practiced sometimes is very, very different. I mean, the recent events, you can see it. But even before that, I mean, how, as an Asian American, I keep thinking back to the Second World War when the government and the Supreme Court allow the internment of Japanese Americans, even those who are born in the US. So when a country can do that, somehow I'm not so sure my allegiance should be to it, even if I were born here. So that's my own personal view, right? Okay, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's just one of my, just a view.
Yeah. So I think, there's a great PBS, series that recently shown about Asian Americans and the kind of struggles the Asian American had from the early days. If you haven't really been able to watch, I highly recommend everybody to watch that. But Etienne, thank you very much for the question. That was a great question.
Xiaojun, if I may add a couple of comments. Etienne, I think it's a great question, but I have to admit that being a Chinese who grew up in China and attended college in China, then went to the US for my graduate school and my postdoc training, now coming back to Asia, I do have a lot of worries or concerns about my identity. From time to time, I feel like I have an identity crisis. I don't know who I am. Am I a Chinese or am I a Americanized Chinese? In many people's eyes, I am. But I would like to share this story with you, just about the value, which is very close to what Xiaojun and Arthur has mentioned. What is the value of the Western kind of democracy world? We kind of know it's freedom, it's equality, it's democracy. And there was a time I was teaching an undergraduate class here in Singapore, and I asked, mostly majority Asian students, they are Indians, they are Chinese, they are Singaporeans. So I asked, what do you think is your value? Because the Western value is very well propagated, everyone knows it, and everyone agrees that those are the good things. So the students here gave me very good answers, and I feel very much inspired and would like to share with you and everyone here is that it's basically they value family, they value community, they value loyalty, and honesty and kindness, right? So these are the things that if you know Chinese, we say 忠孝仁义. So these are the core values that is shared in the Eastern culture. So I think from that point, I feel that I can ignore my nationality. I can ignore which country I come from, but I can share the values that the Western world and the Eastern world can both agree on. All of these things are great, and I don't really have to identify myself with a nationality, but I would like to identify myself with these core values that I think are good things to thrive to. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Alita. Any more questions?
Hi, so I'm, well, first off, I'm Connor Nee. I am a graduating high schooler going into UC Berkeley first year next year. So,
Congratulations.
thank you very much. So I just have a question. So technology was, I think we can agree that technology was first made to serve mankind, to be our tools to be utilized by us. But now we can see that it is exacerbating our economic schisms, especially as machines replace lower level jobs. So I'm just wondering, how can this issue of job loss be addressed through technology or otherwise?
That's another great question. So the way, Greg, we start to think about that is, there are multiple efforts that we need to actually address. So there's not a silver bullet per se. One is we actually need to go back to address the education, to address the gap of the ability for the rich kids and the poor kids the gap of the access to the education resources. That is very important. As we talked about, we're moving into a knowledge-centric economy, and some of the more labor-intensive jobs will be replaced by robotics. So that then how do we actually from young age to get the people who potentially would have ended up in a more labor-intensive jobs from the early on to actually bring education opportunity to them, and so that they can actually participate in a much needed knowledge-based work. Because today I can speak from the practical world is that even though we see large amount of unemployment, those are associated, through the pandemic, those are associated with a lot of the hourly workers. But in terms of the more high-end, data scientists and the high-end, a computer scientist, even today in this world, we're still lacking. So you see the imbalance between there's a great need that's not being fulfilled, and then there is the job that's disappearing, that human and the machine are competing with each other. So we need to address from the young age, that's number one, about equalize the opportunity for education. The second one is actually us, the people who already ended up in the labor-intensive jobs, and we need to actually provide the training and the retraining resources to actually help them to make the transition. From they actually contribute the labor, as opposed to they know how the labor is performed, so they can tell a machine how to do the labor job. So they actually have been there, done it, and now we need to help them to have a relatively like a gradual transition for them to be able to tell machine what they should do. And the second one is that as we move forward, yes, you see the first, second, third industrial revolution. There are the disappearing jobs, but then there's also the opening of new jobs that we don't know yet today. So I think again, there need to be resources to help these people to be able to actually see those new opportunities and also provide some initial seed funding for them to actually make the transition. So those are what I think would a need to address the issue, Greg, you raised, which is a very good issue.
All right, thank you so much. However, I just like to ask. So I definitely understand that re-education into a different sector of the economy is essential to giving these job losses their jobs back. So, but the thing is that because of just the nature of technology, if machines replace, like, say, 15,000 factory workers, we can't really just like re-educate them into 15,000 engineers, no?
Exactly. So, Xiaojun, thank you very much. This is Greg here. I just want to thank you very much for answering the kid's question. It was fantastic. And I really enjoyed your presentation, the videos, and talking about the future of AI. This is so fantastic. And I myself is, I worry about AI would replace my job as a seismic interpreter, oil finder. I worry a lot about that, but I'm kind of confident. Okay, in my lifetime, probably there is no artificial intelligence can replace me, so I'm good. So I'm sort of supportive, but always I have this question about how the society would replace these low-level workers. You're talking about the factory workers, and they're there for a reason. They either didn't have a good education, they didn't have anybody to support them. That's why they end up there. Now we're talking about how much it takes to educate one knowledgeable engineer, right? They're already at the bottom of the pyramid. So when AI replaces their job, where do we go? I don't really see a place in the modern, tech-driven society. I don't see a place for these people. And wouldn't you think about, this is going to cause some kind of social status polarization and instability? Or maybe next generation of revolution, So this is I just throw out this idea for people to think about. So not necessarily need an answer.
So I think, as I said, I've been here 50 years. I've seen a lot of changes. And the laws of well-paying manufacturing job has been going on for a long time in the US. Originally, those jobs are being farmed out to other countries, China included, and now they disappeared, all that. There is no simple answer to it. The right answer to some of that is just education, changing the education, what the young people are getting, what are they being taught as they go through a K-12, and then ultimately in universities. Those are huge challenges. As Xiaojun mentioned, we don't even have enough software engineers right now. So how many of those you think we can talk into teaching high school, right? So the level of the STEM education in the K-12 is a huge issue, not especially in the US, but it's not just in the US. And also the US has a handicap. and you guys are fairly familiar with it. It's called the school board. The guys who design the curriculum that doesn't change for the next 20 years. And those are some of the hurdles here. Those are not easy answers, but really the work needs to be done at that level, at the K-12 level.
Anything, Elita, to add to it?
Oh, it's a very, very interesting discussion. I think it's very closely related to the political climate that we are seeing in the U.S. as well. I'm pretty sure you all know a Democratic candidate, Andrew Yang, who is the only Asian American representative, and his flagship kind of policy is the UBI, Universal Basic Income, and that is kind of going into the direction where it's saying, I believe in the creativity of humans, and I believe in, by freeing labor-intensive kind of jobs, people may be able to create other type of jobs, given the freedom of thinking about that. And the freedom is provided by these kind of universal basic income that is handed to you freely without you need to work. So that's a very interesting thought, and I do not necessarily agree with his policy, but I agree with his confidence in human by saying yes, each industrial revolution would disturb the way of life, and old jobs will disappear, but new jobs will be created. But then the way it's created is by people, not to be afraid of going into the new era. Then to facilitate that, I guess it is people have to have some basic kind of information, basic education, basic incomes to rely on. So I don't really have an answer, but it's a interesting area and a direction to think about. Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. So while we're still open for other questions, I actually put on a chat box a survey. If everybody can type your response, in the chat box, Arthur, that'll give us a sense as to, do we want to have another presentation with related but different topics and different speaker, or we actually hold a follow-up discussion with a more, like a focused group. Or you felt like this is a good, and there's no more further interest for this follow-up. So if you can type in, that'll be great. And we're still open for questions as well. And Richard, please write down. Richard, please tally up the vote.
I have another thing I want to say. So when I learned about Adam Smith and the model of capitalism, I learned mostly about the purely competitive market. But as society progressed, we saw the increasing role of corporations. So I want to know, within the fourth industrial revolution, what will be the role of small businesses?
That's another really, really great question. So the way how I see that is, I wanna share with you what I see. What I see is that very small business, like we're talking about 50 to 60 people and less, small business. I see that in both China, and I see it in both the US and Europe, is that these companies, they are working on the AIs, working on machine learning, working on IoT. These companies, they actually are collaborating more along the value chain. Give you one example is that there's a computer vision company. Their product is actually to use machine learning and AI, like to recognize large amount of facial features and pinpoint down to who you are, and connecting to some of your contextual information, like I'm a scientist, or like I'm a Chinese American, or they can actually contextualize that information, and that's the product of that particular startup company. And you can see that they collaborate a lot with a lot of like for example, they collaborate with Alibaba. So all Alibaba's like a facial recognition like a component are actually provided by them. And they also work together with Huawei. The smart city in Shenzhen was actually done by Huawei, and their facial recognition was done by that company as well. And there's also several Boston-based companies. They use the same computer vision technology from the same company. So the founder of the particular company I'm talking about actually graduated from MIT, and he went to Hong Kong, and later like went to mainland China. So he is collaborating with different small companies. They actually, in order to provide a better solution, like for a more futuristic solution. If we're on, the way how I see that is the fourth industrial revolution. It's a revolution, so it'll go through a tremendous phase of expansion and growth. And during that phase, zero-sum competition is perhaps not gonna help like the small business owners to solidify its market position. And because for a small business, you inevitably are providing a really small, like a point solution. So you have to put yourself into a chain, to form a more larger solution that target one sector of the market. Does that make sense? And as you grow, maybe when you have two players, you may actually get into that competition. But at this juncture, even the big business, because the industrial revolution require a much better connection digitally, and the current big enterprise, they are more, the boundaries were more set through the old way of working and the old value chain. So if you do not merge and collaborate with other company, you won't really find your strengths that's more, tailored to your future, strengths from a competitive, like a position perspective. Does that help answer your question, Etienne?
I thought that was super insightful. Thank you so much.
I want to add something, Etienne. One of the things that I observed during my career is a lot of the innovation, as I would say, probably the majority of the innovation comes from small companies. The Apples, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, they all start from small companies, small ideas, right? What they grew into is big company, but the original ideas are all small companies, and they are literally, formed in the garage, like Hewlett Packard, the famous garage still over in Palo Alto, and it's the same in oil and gas. Some of us we are working with. Right, I have worked with a couple of startups. One famous example is we had some of you who in oil and gas knows that we had the CM project, generating synthetic data. The group who actually won the competition, won the bid to generate the data was 3 people, you know, Tierra Geoscience, 3 people. And they grew up, they got up, Hollywood bought them and don't know what to do with them. That's a different issue. But that's the thing, right? Some of you know Chengbin, you know, his Nexus, small company. So I can encourage you guys, if you have ideas, go be innovative, start your own little company. But there's a big but in there. Get with somebody who knows the business side. That side to help you grow. Don't just focus on the technical side. You need the business side to help you grow from a small company to a Google.
Right.
Eye-opening. Thank you.
Hey, Xiaojun, this is Ming.
Hey, Ming.
Thank you very much for offering this workshop. The whole family were listening, actually. For the kids, I'm Kevin and Leah's dad. Some of you probably know Kevin and Leah better than I. But now Kevin and Leah are offline, so I can say a few words. Otherwise they would be embarrassed. Again, it's a great workshop. Thank you. I would like to offer 3 comments, and Xiaojun, you have touched all these actually through your presentation, and also Arthur and Elita has mentioned as well. One, I think this is an amazing time for the young kids. This is amazing time. You guys are lucky to live in this time. There are many, many things for the world for you guys to tackle. Secondly, this is not a technology problem. As Xiaojun, you mentioned as well. This is, and Arthur just mentioned too, this is not just about technology. This is about many, many things. This is a whole revolution. And thirdly, you know, most of us are American, Chinese backgrounds, especially the kids. Most of you are American born, Chinese. But this is not just American, China, or Chinese problem. You know, we have had a privilege to live in a few countries and traveled to many countries. So we have a pretty good global view. And this is a global, I would say, opportunity. So don't just focus on the relationship or the issues in China or in US or between the 2 countries. This is global. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ming. That was a great footnote. You know, like I think that really crystallized the message a lot better. Thank you. It is really a global problem. Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, Xiaojun. I'm Laurel. I'm a recent grad from UT Austin. I graduated with a petroleum engineering degree, and I guess I have an energy industry specific question for you. I'm actually thinking about transitioning into renewable energy. I'm going to grad school at Stanford, doing civil engineering in renewable energy. And just want to ask you, do you see, because right now we have like a oil and gas downturn. I have some friends who got laid off just 2 months into their job in like an oil and gas company. Do you see the oil and gas industry recover from this pandemic or this recession, or do you see like the energy industry transitioning into like a renewable energy dominated industry?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, like so first of all, congratulations, Ariel, and you know, Professor Alita Lee that you have saw, she actually graduated from Stanford, and then you know, like Arthur Chan, and Ming, who's Leah and Kevin's dad, we're all in the oil industry, and I saw a few other parents. We're all in the oil industry, so I think I'll answer your question first, and I invite all my industry colleagues to chime in as well. I would answer your question with what Ming, Leah, and Kevin's dad actually said. This is an amazing opportunity. It comes with the challenges. So I would use that to characterize the oil industry. I think the high oil price and the oil as a dominate, energy form is not going to, we're going to a transition, like a period. And, we have to, address the dual challenges that's facing the energy industry. On one side, yes, we still need to provide a cost-effective energy for all the global population, and particularly the people who currently don't have access to energy. But on the other side, for us to, really control the carbon footprint and, address that through either the energy efficiency or through the energy transition, that is real. And so that's number one. Number two is the energy industry, especially oil industry, thanks to the technological innovation, we have gone from a era of a scarcity of oil resources to a bit of a era of abundance, through the fracking and all that. But at this point, the cost structure of those, more the US centric through the fracking technology extracted, oil, barrels are still not that cost competitive. So we're at a juncture where there's the abundance, there's the energy transition, but then the technology is not entirely mature, for us to have a certainty about abundance, and have a certainty about, the transition. So that's how you see the volatility. So that's gonna be, the reality the oil industry will continue to face. So then, as a young professional, the way how I see that is, it's like what means that it's an amazing opportunity, but it comes with amazing challenges. So you have to make yourself really fit, to be able to actually negotiate and weather through these significant challenges, and somehow, bring your contribution and, to help, the industry to go through that relatively turmoil and uncertain period of time. That's how I see the oil and gas industry. It's gonna be there, but if you are here for an easy job, I think that's the wrong place to be. But if you feel like this is a place where you provide a very important form of the energy to the global energy equation, and you are not afraid to actually learn new things and embrace challenges, and have an open mind, I think then the opportunity is very broad.
Yeah, so I'm the one who gone through a number of these up and downs. As a matter of fact, when I started graduate school, I have not even heard of getting into oil industry. MIT is not, as you know, it's not an oil industry focused program. And I think the main thing Yes, as Xiaojun said, I don't want to repeat what I was saying. I mean, the industry has got up and down, but still there are a lot of things to be solved from a scientific perspective, and also from a me being a bit more environmentally conservative. I like to be able to use technology to cleanly and efficiently to extract as much oil and gas out of the ground as possible, not necessarily for energy or transportation, but you can't replace the petrochemicals. Right now, you see with this social distancing, everybody putting up the plexiglass thing. Where's plexiglass come from? That's a petrochemical product. All the gloves you put on, that's petrochemical products, right? All the PPEs. So that's a significant segment of the U.S. Not the U.S. of the demand that is still going to be oil and gas focus, and renewable. In general, we should really support the renewable, right? But renewable, I will tell you right now, is a very much more affected by politics, okay, than just pure oil and gas. Whether a certain wind farm can be built, whether you can build the hydroelectric power, whether the solar panel location, all this, how much the subsidies you're being paid by the government for your solar panel, everything is really right now is still very much of control by the politics of it. As if you are comfortable with that, that's fine. I mean, I think scientifically, it's certainly an area we should really spend our money on. Okay, but just going in, knowing the whole picture, not just a near-term solution. A classic example is electric cars. If we can continue just overnight turn all the cars into electric, where is the electricity going to come from? Where's the infrastructure going to come from? But more importantly, 10 years down the road, how are you going to dispose all the dead batteries, which are really lethal from the lithium, right? So these are kind of things I think need good research people going in and thinking about it. So I'm glad to hear that you're interested in going into this kind of a problem. Okay.
Yeah. Any other comments? Ming from, Yu Hong, I saw you online as well.
I had a question. So like for like some jobs, I think that there are jobs where they're low skill, but they can't be replaced by AI. Like for instance, because like AI and computers have to be coded and they can only do like operation by operation, and you have to code that into them. Like for instance, if like riding a bicycle, you can't really describe to someone else how exactly you ride a bicycle. You just say like, you just do it. So wouldn't there be I feel like some jobs could be like that and won't be replaced by AI, but are still low skills. So how would like this revolution affect those types of jobs?
You mean like the higher skill jobs?
Well, like, because riding a bicycle isn't really like a high skill task, but you can't like describe how to do it. So like in the same way, there are some low skill tasks that you wouldn't be able to describe like operation by operation to be able to code an AI to do it for you, or like a robot.
Right. So the way how I would see that is, going back to that Amazon fulfillment center, what you see is a bit of a symphony between the robotics and the human being. So what you're gonna start to see would be a bit of a symphony between human and AI. it's more what we call augmented, like a artificial intelligence, to actually augment human activity. So for the things what you mentioned, it might be a very complex, like a whole series of a complex movement and complex flows and all that. It's very difficult to write it down and standardize and put that into a computer code. Those will still be remained in the human, so the world moving forward, as you see, is a gradual augmenting. That's what the Industrial Revolution is talking about, merging the digital, the physical, and the biological world. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to build off of Richard's question.
Okay.
How would you think this industrial revolution would affect like the entertainment industry? So you said like it's gonna like integrate with people. Like how would you think it would integrate with the entertainment industry?
That's another great question. So I think, to answer your question, maybe we can think about the great entertainment high-tech company, which is a Pixar. So Pixar, the well-known part of the founder is Steve Jobs. But then the less well-known part of the co-founder actually is a professor, a computer science professor from University of Utah. And I actually happened to visited him maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. And, the way how you think about Pixar, thinking about, how you train the dragons, that was a Pixar movie. You think about how the animation, when we go from 2D to much more like a 3D liking. Do you recall the transition? Thinking about the early days of a Tom and a Jerry, it's a very flat, like a cartoonish, like a 2D images. And then how you train the dragon, it's a Pixar movie, like the dragons and the characters, they are cartoons, but they look very 3D like a real people. And that's where there are a lot of digital technology and a lot of the, artificial intelligence that was involved to actually put them together. So you see the merge of the entertainment, even the art design, right? So because in the past, you were more thinking about how you would draw out that Tom and Jerry. But in the Pixar, how you train a dragon, you actually would consider how you arrange them spatially and, more thinking about the effect as opposed to the drawing itself.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Xiaojun is saying, right? How many of you have seen the latest Star Wars movie? Yeah. Have you seen it? Well, they don't watch it, but the Leia character, right? Carrie Fisher, she was dead, but she was acting in the movie. That's just all AI to turn that into that person acting.
Right. So I think, Nancy, what you see from Arthur's example, it'll challenge you to be a lot more, use your imagination a lot more, and the tools at your hand, and the kind of characters and the characteristics of the characters become a lot more rich. So I think you wanted to be aware of all that so that you be able to take a full advantage of it.
Xiaojun, I think we have 2 questions in the chats. Maybe
Okay.
how about Steve? Do you want to ask your question? Well, maybe I will, Steve. Maybe I will read it out.
Okay. All right. So, so how will we incentivize the move towards cooperation? The people who have the power are also the ones who can benefit from a competitive environment. Naturally, the one who benefit from the large amount of control to themselves would want to keep the status quo. What leverage or motivation do you think could be implemented in order to make the necessary change? That's another great question. Very, very good question. So the way how I see that is, like if you think about, it's more about how you frame the win-win, like a situation. If it's all about competing at limited resource, I think there's a very little incentive for the people who are actually in the power position to actually become cooperative. But I think at this juncture, there are 2 things that would work as an incentive. Number one is the humanity actually are facing common issues as a main, like I mentioned about, there's the climate issue, there is the pandemic, we in the face of a pandemic, we are neutralized. None of the current technology can do anything, or even the government is very limited. We're brought to the knees to the pandemic, and there's the threat about the natural disasters. There's the threat about the growing gap between the rich and poor. Every country has that, and then for company, for moving into the fourth industrial revolution, the biggest issue company and a country faces is actually the talent. There's just not enough of a talent to actually fulfill a single company or single country's goals. As you see some of the talent distribution as a proxy of the talent, you see that China, India, US, and Europe, how these talents are distributed. And it's more like everybody have a piece of the puzzle to actually contribute for a bigger, like a goodness of the, the better and the brighter future, as opposed to one country or one company or one entity has the total solution. At this point, there's not a single entity has that, has all the cards in their hands. Does, that would incentivize if everybody feels safe to actually be on the same table and collaborate and moving forward together. Because right now the trust and the feeling the safety is not quite there. I think the incentive everybody may be able to see, but it's more the trust and the safety issue. Hopefully that address your question, Steve.
There is another one from Harper. Maybe I will read the question for you, Xiaojun. How can people from STEM degree and non-STEM degree cooperate better? How should these non-STEM graduates position themselves? Do they at least need to go through some formal training in STEM?
So I think in the future, the ability to actually understand, the technology and what the technology can do, to the parts of the society that you are interested to put your heart and effort to actually work on, I think you wanted to really have the ability to very quickly understand, STEM or not, what people are talking about, and what are the trend, and what are the what are the key development and the key players. You do want to understand them. Just give you one example. In this COVID-19, the past 2 to 3 months US lockdown, you saw the Amazon operation has been 24/7 and nonstop. There were some reported strikes, and employee got sick, but by and large, the operation was carried out very smoothly, and everybody was able to get what they needed, and particularly the kind of urgent and essential and important items. So that operation is actually headed by a guy who was a music major in undergraduate, and then he went on to business school. But if you look at the operation, so he owns the operation. So the fulfillment center, what you saw, that robotic technology, so it'll be under his purview from a management perspective. You can see that he would actually be able to integrate all that together. And the only advice I have is, this is an era you're gonna have a lot of a big and a significant amount of information. So what you want to do is to really have a framework in your head as to how this world is moving forward and what's important, and make sure you continue to learn and continue to actually build and test your hypothesis. Any other adds to?
I may want to add a comment on that. I really like the idea of STEM and non-STEM collaboration. I think one area that I can point to, and it has been mentioned many times, is in the data visualization area. If you think about how the map of coronavirus has spread out in the world, that data visualization is so connected to everyone and has so much impact to the society. And that is something that I think non-STEM graduates will have a better angle in terms of how do we, or what the representation should look like. Whereas, if you work together with the STEM people who process the data, gather the data, analyze the data, then that will really make a lot of impact. And another comment on formal training. I think everyone who is attending this Zoom meeting shows that we can get training or education in a way that is really infeasible before, right? And there are so many open source courses, there are so many things that you can teach by yourself. Even in STEM, I feel the students can learn so much more from all the resources online already. A formal training per se is really, to me, outdated. So I think it goes back to Xiaojun's point to pick up the skills. You want to be tech savvy, whoever you are, whether you are STEM or non-STEM. So how do you do that? How do you become tech savvy? I think there are just tremendous amount of resources freely available online. And you have to be self-disciplined in a way such that you will take your time to pick up these knowledges. And I really think if you are self-disciplined, or if you have enough interest, you really don't need a formal training at all.
Well, absolutely, Lita. I just want to remind the younger people who who weren't there when the revolution occurred into the fourth starting the fourth industrial transition, where I was Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg share one trait. None of them graduated from college. Okay, they just got in and just got into something they're interested in, develop it. No formal training, period.
Saying we failed already.
Huh? What?
We failed.
Yes, we failed already.
We failed already.
But just like anything else, you develop an interest. As Elita said, there's a lot of things you can learn these days online, read the books and all that. And so like myself, for example, you know, I start developing a taste of drinking wine, and I taught myself what the different wine regions are, what the different wines are, and all that. So that's an example of how you can actually learn these things online, reading books. You don't need a formal education.
Yeah. And I saw a few, like exchanges between Alita and Harper. I think that's a great point, is that, coming back to what Ming had, said, this generation is incredibly, have an incredible, amazing opportunity in terms of everything, in terms of learning, in terms of, the boundless, opportunity in front of you. They are all the challenges you have to navigate through, because every opportunity does come with challenges. But I think, you perhaps don't want to put yourself into a box. Like I'm a STEM and a non-STEM. I think at the very beginning, Arthur mentioned for this generation, which I strongly, agree, that it's very important to actually understand the history. And particularly around the, the Asian Americans, it's very important to understand the heritage you come from. It's not just about the food. It's really about all the teachings, coming out of, the several thousand years of the civilization. It's important to understand that and look for wisdom in there, on top of the, the modern several hundred years of the Western civilization as well. I think, you guys have the boundless opportunity that's more based on the current time and the era you are in, as well as, you actually are the double, identity, if you will. You carry both, the Western as well as the Eastern heritage. And that is perhaps the key into the future. So I think we are awfully, I never had a seminar or session that was a 1 hour beyond the schedule. So at this point, I do want to thank everybody for your participation, and thank Alita and thank Arthur for really helping making the session to be very, very fruitful and interesting conversation. Thank for everybody who asked the question and responded to the poll. Looks like there are sufficient of interest that we have a follow-up session. So for those who are interested, wanted to stay a little longer, Arthur, myself, and Alita will hang out. But feel free to drop the formal, a session. I would say that's, it's ended. And thank you very much for your participation.
Well, thank you, Xiaojun, for organizing, initiating this. This is great discussion. And I will be happy to help facilitate future discussions, forums. And well, let's keep this going because I see overwhelming interests here.
Yes. Thank you, Xiaojun, for actually giving me, this old guy, an opportunity to try to connect with the younger Asian American, right, the Chinese Americans, and hope to provide some of my perspective, to them. And as you know, my daughter is also born in the U.S. and that they face these kind of challenges, and I don't think there's a right answer. I think that it's good to us all discuss different perspective. Xiaojun, you've been there for what, 25 years or something like that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You remember really well.
That's because I remember when I left MIT and left you
right.
alone.
Right. I think another benefit from this conversation, I think a lot of the high school students, as well as the students are still in college and a graduate school, that Alita actually graduated from Stanford, went to MIT for a postdoc, and now is a professor at the Singapore National University. And Arthur Chen, he actually did his undergraduate in Cornell University. I think there's a student right now, is going to Cornell University. I'm not sure if she's still online. And then went to MIT for graduate school, and stayed at MIT for 25 years.
Oh no, less than that.
Okay, 20 years.
Less than that. I started in 73, 11, 96. 23.
Yeah, 23 years as a faculty member there. So I think in addition to the topics that we are, keenly interested, any academic direction and, questions around that line, this would be a very good opportunity as well.
Yeah, so I want to mention another one to the young people who are still online. Xiaojun works for ExxonMobil, the largest oil company in the world, the producers, right? My career, after I left MIT, I worked for Western Atlas, who become Baker, and then Halliburton. So I work on the service company side. The perspective of the oil industry from the two sides are very different. If you ever want to find out what is which, what's the perspective from either side, I think it'll be, at least I will be happy to talk to you about, what the perspective from the service company side. And I'm sure Xiaojun can tell you what ExxonMobil is like.
Right.
But they're very different,
Yeah, very different.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions? So what I'm gonna do is, we'll keep the conversation going, and maybe we can do it once a month or twice a month. I'll actually send out a note in the WeChat to gauge the interest level, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. Xiaojun, how about I have a suggestion? Just for this to be more targeted, could maybe whoever is in the WeChat group put out some questions that they would like to discuss before you arrange the next speaker or the next topic. And
I think that's a great suggestion. Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So final call for questions. Okay.
Okay.
So, with that, good night. Have a great day. Wherever you are, I hope you actually got something out of tonight or today and enjoy the discussion.